Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Hey, Bruce.
Hey, David. How are you doing today?
Still processing, Bruce. Still in a pretty down mood. I have been ever since Game 4, the Game 4 result. I mean, the last two games were just so brutal. Brutal way to lose the hockey, two hockey games in the third period like that. Just really hard to take, really hard to process. And I'm trying not to. I've made a few snap judgments already. I've come down pretty hard on Dave Tippett. But that wasn't so much, honestly, that wasn't, to be fair to myself, that wasn't so much a snap judgment as something that had been bothering me. You know, the decision to break up that line had been bothering me since the moment it was made. And I'd been talking about it. And I just think the chickens came home to roost on it, honestly, Bruce. I think the Oilers, Tippett got what he asked for in terms of the performance of those two lines. I think it was completely foreseeable. I was hoping for better, but better never came in terms of the performance of the top two lines. And I have a hard time getting past, aside from the fact, I'd have a harder time getting past it if Tippett didn't make so many good calls all season long, including putting that Draisaitl, Yamamoto, Nugent Hopkins line together. But man, I needed to see that line in the playoffs. And I just find it crushing still, Bruce. If I'm completely honest, I still find it crushing that we never saw that line until the very, very end. And they just play so well together. And McDavid never has, even with Draisaitl or Nugent Hopkins, McDavid's always more of a soloist. And I think you need to plan his line around that aspect of him rather than try to build a different kind of line. And I think you could have got what you got out of McDavid without giving him Nugent Hopkins. You would have got the same performance out of him, which was pretty good. But you just took away Draisaitl and Yamamoto and Nugent, like the most they could offer, which I think would have been enough to beat Chicago. So I know this isn't focused on by many other the pundits or the people writing in the media, but for me it is a main focus, and it's the one area where I kind of bear a bit of a grudge. I'll try to get over it though. Bruce, we're going to talk about the draft. We're going to talk about the draft lottery today.
Yep.
And we're going to talk about Kurt Levins's excellent 9 Things post today. Before we get into that, any thoughts about what I just said? I ranted a bit there, so I'll give you the same opportunity.
Well, I mean, we went into the concern before was McDavid playing with wingers that weren't up to his caliber, and that certainly was a concern. Well, in the playoff series, they went with Leon with 2 wingers that were in the $800,000 salary range, and so he was trying to carry that line and had his moments. They had their moments as a line, but they weren't really difference makers the way the Dynamite line had been. And I share your discomfiture at the breakup of that trio. I frankly just don't understand A, why it happened, and B, why it took until the last half of the third period of the last game to even try to go back to it. And that just leaves me shaking my head.
Yeah, we're on the same page.
Yep, on that one.
We are on the same page, because I think that could have been the difference maker, honestly, in the series. I think it would have given the Blackhawks all kinds of ongoing trouble at even strength, and would have put them on their heels in a way they never were, having that line out there every third or fourth shift. So anyway, it's hard. Like, when I think of the series, I think of 2 things. Like, it was still a close series despite all of this, and I think it was so many weird goals and balances could have gone either way. So I'll give the Oilers that. But I don't think this series didn't have to be that series, and I wonder if it wouldn't have been if from day one we had seen a different lineup from the Oilers.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
the
Yeah,
fancy
go ahead.
stats actually favored Edmonton, other than game one, where they clearly deserved to lose by every measure. Games two, three, and four, Edmonton had the better of play in all of the underlying stats. There was one of the top fancy stats sites. Who the heck was it? I retweeted it yesterday. Showed that in a category called expected goals, which is this is what you would expect the goals to be based on the flow of play. That of the 16 play-in teams, Edmonton was number one, and by a good margin for expected goal differential. Right, Vegas was ahead of them, and
Just wait. Is this
Colorado
what is this,
Colorado was
Bruce?
just behind expected goals
For what though? For the regular season?
for the four playoff games that they play for the playoffs
Oh, because you're
play-ins.
so you're including Vegas in their
Well,
exhibition games.
the stat included all the seeding
Heck,
games plus the play-in games. I'm saying chuck the seeding games because I don't think they're that
yeah.
important,
No,
frankly.
they're not. Yeah,
So
okay.
of the
Yeah,
16
gotcha.
play-in teams, Edmonton was number one. Of the 24 teams total, Edmonton is number two. And so when Chicago was way down at the other end of the spectrum, and they got the gold. Edmonton created the chances, but they couldn't finish the chances, or more to the point, Chicago finished way more of their chances than you would expect, and that was um, the nature of the beast. Now, I don't think that stat's the be all and end all. I don't think expected goals considers how many shots were deflected by Edmonton's own players against their own goalie, stuff like that. Like there was certainly some some of the misfortune that the Oilers encountered was of their own doing. Let's put it that way. But I'm not at all convinced that the better team won that series.
I think by our own count, the Oilers had 62 grade A chances, Bruce,
Mm-hmm.
and the Blackhawks had 48.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pretty significant advantage for the Oilers in grade A chances.
Right.
And we include posts, like post shots in that, like in our own stat. We're including when Chicago hit the post and from the slot area, and would that was a grade A chance in our books for them. And some of the sites, I don't know if they do or not, but anyway, we do, and that's a significant difference, um, advantage for the Oilers, and that almost works out like the percentages are almost add up to 100%. So it's like the Oilers are like 60-40 almost, or whatever it was there.
Yeah.
Anyway, not to be. Bruce, all of this strange and twisted path leads the Oilers in this weird position that I was never excited about, where they would have this 12.5 chance of getting Alexis Lafreniere in the draft
Yeah.
this year. So the Oilers looked like they're going to draft around, 20, 21, 22, depending on where they finished in the playoffs too. Is that how it's set? How far you go in the playoffs? Or is that just for the Stanley Cup champion?
Yeah,
They draft
it
last.
gets reorganized, but based on them on their regular season standing without any adjustments, they were right around number 20. And then
Yeah.
if it had been like a normal playoffs, it would have been up or down from there, but would only been significantly down if Edmonton had gone to the finals or won the cup.
Okay.
Whereas now they've shifted up into the non-playoff team category, so into the top 15, and they have just the way the lottery worked out. There's one pick that still hasn't been determined, and of course that's number one overall. So the eight teams that all get knocked out, which we know seven of them, and the loser of tonight's Toronto Columbus game will join them, each will have the identical 12.5% odds. So at least they didn't weight those odds, they just gave everybody the same. And so Edmonton has a 12.5% chance of the number one pick. They have a 12.5% at the number 15 pick, which they would get only if Pittsburgh won the lottery, because only Pittsburgh of the play-in losers had a better record than the Oilers. So Pittsburgh wins the lottery, Edmonton moves down one spot. Otherwise, there's a 75% chance that they're going to be picking 14th overall. So I think that's sort of reasonably what we should be expecting, while holding out some malign hope that the bingo ball will come up in Edmonton's favor again and cause heads to explode across the hockey universe.
when you we were talking earlier today on the phone about this, and like the first thing that kind of broke through my depressed fog as an Oilers fan right now was the notion that the Oilers might win the lottery, and it wasn't the idea of heads exploding, Bruce. It's just the thought. Well, first of all, it's the thought they could get Alexis Lafreniere,
Absolutely.
which is a very exciting thought. And I know that, yeah, heads will explode, but Bruce, I personally think there's a kind of rough justice if the Oilers are the Penguins. And I'm hoping for this now. Like before, I had been thinking that it might be a bit embarrassing for the Oilers to win, but I hadn't really I didn't know what I was going to feel until the Oilers lost, and now they're in this position. And you know what, Bruce? I didn't whine one bit I accepted the NHL's explanation for the playoffs and the way they did it.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't, I know a lot of fans were outraged and continue to be. And I get that. And both you and Kurt Levens are in that camp. And I completely get that, but I wasn't in that camp.
Oh,
I accepted what the NHL, I accepted what they did. And so what, you know what, if the Oilers, the other part of me accepting that was the thought, well, if the Oilers lose, they'll be in the lottery and they have a chance to get the top pick. That's the deal. Mm-hmm. So I think, hey, good. If the Oilers win this, that's the deal. And I'm not going to.
Well, they missed the playoffs, right?
That's right. They missed the playoffs.
Right.
And according to the NHL's thing, they deserve to be in this lottery now. And they're in it. And if they win it, great. I don't think people should whine about it. Like, suck it up. Because Oiler fans have to suck it up. We had to suck it up that the Oilers were playing a team in Chicago that really didn't have the right to be there by some standards, by a lot, by the standard of the regular season standard. So we sucked that up. We've accepted the consequence. Well, now here it's time for everybody else. So, shut the F up if the Oilers win it is my position, because such is life. This is the COVID NHL. It's a little bit weird. It's a little bit wonky. But if the Penguins or the Oilers win it, good. They deserve it. Just that under this system, under this weird system, they deserve it. Just like the Penguins got, was it Crosby in 2000? Who did they get?
2005, when they had the complete draft was done by lottery. After the lost season.
Such is life.
And they did a lottery right across the entire league, and lo and behold, Pittsburgh got number one. Well, they used it, more power to them. And we'll see.
What's your take? What's your take on this whole thing?
Well, I mean, obviously you get that 1 in 8 chance to come through for Edmonton would be another gift from the hockey gourds. It would solve Edmonton's problem at top 6 left wing in a quick hurry, because I think Lafreniere is going to be there on whatever team he goes to. He's going to be on the team and in the top 6 immediately on, a nice bonus-laden contract, but still, a very reasonable one for what he could be expected to produce. He's an exciting player. I watched him play multiple times at the Linka Gretzky tournament 2 years ago, the one that should be going on basically right now in 2020 if the universe had unfolded like it should this year. Anyway, he was very, very impressive then, and he's just continued to build his impressive credentials since then. Of course, he won a gold medal for Team Canada at the World Juniors this year, and produced mighty splendid stats in the Quebec League. He's, according to most, he's the he's the shining star of the 2020 draft class. I mean, some of them, there's this guy Byfield that some folks like as the number one, who's a close second, but it's basically you're picking in the top or you're picking in the middle of the round. That's basically the two situations for Edmonton. But if they win it, if they win the lottery, well, they were the one that got the most of the short end of the stick of the format when the NHL decided to basically throw out the regular season and instead basically expand the playoffs by 8 teams and expand the format. And let's do away with the divisional format. This is my real pet peeve. They've been playing divisional formats for years. Edmonton was second in the Pacific, and all of a sudden they had to get seeded by conference, and they found a way to put them in fifth place and having to play in. And, they lost. They got beat. But, that's, as you say, if that's the nature of the beast, well, then I guess they belong in the lottery. And if they win it, well, so it goes. Heads will explode and mine won't.
No, neither will mine. I'll be really happy at this point. I thought I might be a little bit embarrassed by it because we've won so many lotteries in the past. But that said, hey, such is life. Sucks to be you if we win. Not you, but
Right.
complaining fans from other teams, Leafs fans.
Nice to
Um,
hear other people complain. I've been doing enough of it myself over this whole
yeah,
schmozzle.
and if Toronto actually loses to Columbus, I'll feel the same way if they win the lottery. I'll be happy for Toronto. Like
Well,
I actually kind of hope there's a little bit of rough justice here, and that that one of the better teams wins, that Pittsburgh or Edmonton win it, or because that would be some justice here because there was a little bit of injustice. I see the point that people make. Like I get that. So I'm not saying they're incorrect. I just think in hockey it's like there's an irrational aspect of being a hockey fan, and you kind of feel how you feel about things in a very kind of tribal way. So right now, for instance, I'm thinking like I've never cheered for the Flames before, Bruce, never once. But I'm thinking for some reason I think this year I could actually get behind the Flames and root for the Flames. But having said that, I won't know until I actually watch a Flames game and see if I can root for them or not. Maybe I can't.
I already
Uh,
did watch the Flames game and I was rooting for the Jets.
well, that was different though. Now that the Oilers are out, now that the
Yeah, I
Oilers are
heard.
out, it's
Okay.
just because part of me, for some reason this year, I just feel like I want a Canadian team to.
Well,
I'm
it's high
tired of
frickin' time.
yeah, I'm tired of American teams winning. So this is the kind of the tribal aspect that's driving me right now. Is like, yeah, I think actually I could like if the Flames are playing some American team, I think I could get, or even the Leafs, Bruce.
Hmm.
I might be cheering for the Leafs tonight against Columbus, which I would never do normally, but I just feel like it's time for a Canadian team to do something in the playoffs, and I'm hoping to see that. So, but maybe when I'm actually watching, I won't feel that way anymore, and I'll be my old hatred of those teams will rise up. The Canucks
Go,
too.
Chucky, go. How are you with that one, David?
Chucky.
Matt Kachuk.
Oh,
He's
hey,
known as
maybe.
Chuck. The Calgary calls him Chucky, and fans of the team remembering that movie are probably pretty good with that nickname as well. I know I am.
So, Bruce, one of the other consequences of the draft is of the play-in round is, I think, very significant. And so, even if the Oilers lose the first overall pick, which is likely tonight,
Right?
they're gonna move up
Yep.
5, 6, 7, 8 spots in the draft, whatever that turns out to be.
Yep.
And for a team that has still a big need for a top forward, this
Hmm.
is super significant because this draft is a draft absolutely rich in top forward prospects, players who within maybe not next year, but possibly the year after, because forwards move into the NHL fairly quickly,
Yes.
or not. And this is what's concerning about a player like Jesse Puljujärvi who's yet to make it. The good ones usually make it fairly fast at forward within 2 or 3 years. And I think that's fair to say. And this draft is full of players who have that potential. If you get the right guy, maybe not next year, but the year after that, even at 14, or the year after that, you could have a winger who will be in your top six. So um, the Oilers are that much more likely to get one of these I think there's about 15 of these guys in the draft. And the Oilers were in a probable spot to get one of them, to have one of them fall to them if they're drafting 20th. But now they're going to get one of them. They're going to get one of these wingers. And so I looked at the consensus. I looked at the 20 people who rate draft picks in the NHL, like kind of public people who do this, like Bob McKenzie and McKeans and um, Edwards and ISS and Corey Pronman. And I just looked at their consensus list of who they have rated. So Lafreniere really is the consensus first pick. Of
Yes.
the 20 people I looked at, uh, 19 of them had Lafreniere in the first spot. The only person who went against that was Cam Robinson, who has him second overall. And my list includes Sean Patrick Ryan, who rates prospects at the Cult of Hockey and on his own at the Oil Night site. He has Lafreniere at number 1. Sean Patrick Ryan has Quinton Byfield at number 4, and that's the low end for Byfield. ISS also has him at number 4, as does Fisher. There's a number of people who have him at 4 or 3. So Byfield isn't the consensus number 2 pick even. So there's a lot of people who favor Tim Stolze. Some people like Lucas Raymond more than Byfield. Some people like Jamie Drysdale more than Byfield. So there's a bit more of a debate there. I think the Oilers would definitely take. No, Lafreniere is a winger, but on a team with McDavid and Draisaitl, and Nugent Hopkins, that's perfect, right? Like the
Wingers
finally,
what Oilers need the most is skill on the wings.
Makes
it's
perfect
a huge
sense.
hole in this team.
Well, they need more skill on defense too, but
they got that in the system.
They have that in the system with Broberg and Bouchard. So that's where they stand on the first pick. But at the 15th pick, and we've talked about this a little bit in the past, there's a number of players who might slide, who are probably going to be there. One of Jack Quinn from Ottawa, Dawson Mercer, with I can't remember what team he's on right now. He's in the Quebec League. Connor Zary, who's in the Western League, I believe. Seth Jarvis, who's I think he's with Portland. Those are the 4 guys who most come to mind. There's Jan Misak, who some people like, Hendrix Lapierre, Maverick Bork, Rodion Amarov, a Russian player, Nolan Gunler, a Swedish player. We'll see who the Oilers like, but I think they're now more likely to get at the higher end. There's these really strong group of CHL forwards: Quinn, Mercer, Zary, and Jarvis, and one of them will be there for the Oilers to take. Now, maybe the Oilers will think they like Amarov or Gunler, a European player, better. I don't know, but there's some really, really highly touted CHL players who are going to be there. Plus, Bruce, and this is the interesting one, the goalie, Yaroslav Askarov. There's one goalie who's there as well in the top. And
are you saying Oilers have a need in goal, David?
I am saying the Oilers have a definite needing, so much so, Bruce, that I think they might have to trade. They might trade a defenseman for a goalie. Like they could trade it, they could make a trade of one of their top 4 D-men for a forward, for a top 6 winger. Some people are suggesting that the Winnipeg Jets might be a natural trading partner for like a Nikolai Ehlers, or you trade a Oscar Klefbom or a Darnell Nurse for Ehlers. That I've seen that floated around for years now, honestly. But that might come to fruition. But the Oilers, but maybe they need to trade one of their D-men for a goalie, for a kind of equivalent goalie in the NHL. And I wouldn't be surprised at all. We're going to have to dig into, Ken Holland is used to disappointment, Bruce. But anyway, so what do you think about before we get into what the Oilers are going to do again, what do you think of their draft, where they're likely to end up and what they might do?
Well, that list of guys you just gave, there was a pretty high chance that 1 or 2 of them would have dropped all the way down to 20 or 21 or wherever they would have been before. But now in fact, I think it's a mathematical certainty that they're going to have a choice of 3 or 4 or 5 of these guys.
Yes.
So they're just higher up the pecking order, and they have a better chance of getting the guy that they've singled out. I mean, obviously that just puts the onus on Edmonton scouts to get it right and get a real strong player. But picking in the middle of the first round of this draft is not a bad spot to be.
It's like picking in the top. It's like picking between 5 and 10, I think, in most other drafts. In many other drafts, Bruce, I would say, based on what people are saying about this draft, it seems to be one of these, especially if you're looking for a forward. If you're looking for a defenseman, I think you're going to be reaching a little bit more. And some teams are going to be in that position, right? We've been there where the Oilers just desperately needed a D-man, right? So there's going to be some teams drafting between, like, let's say 7 and 20 who are they're just going to be taking a defenseman, and because they need a defenseman. So and there's only a couple that scream kind of top 10 pick quality. There's Jake Sanderson and Holloway. What's his name? Jamie Drysdale, excuse me. Holloway's a forward. So there's 2 that kind of have top 10 pedigree. But other than that, it seems like a bit of a reach. So, um, yeah, I am excited about, not about the Oilers losing, but just looking forward now. That's all we can do as fans,
All we
and
can do.
all we can do. I'm excited about this draft position the Oilers are going to get. I hope they get first, but I'm excited about whether they are going to draft, because there was a chance, a slight chance, that the Oilers wouldn't get one of the very top prospects and wouldn't get the guy they wanted at 20th. But I think they're going to get that guy now for sure. So, Bruce, do you have any other thoughts? Should we go over to move on to Kurt's column?
No, let's move on.
So Kurt wrote a 9 things column when he was. I'm a little hesitant to start weighing in on what the Oilers should do or shouldn't do next year, because I just the disappointment of the playoffs is so great, and the I don't want to get recency bias to say, oh, they got to do this, they got to do that, because I think that would be a mistake. That's a mistake right now. Certainly Ken Holland's not going to do that. He's going to take some time, take a deep breath, think about things, and come up with a plan. And I think for someone like, we try to comment in a fairly serious way, although we're fans, just fans, who don't have a lot of inside information and don't have all the information on who's available in other teams and all, just endless things that we don't know that Ken Holland does know. But even in this position, I think it's good to take a breath and think, okay, let's set aside the recent thing and think of the big picture. So I'm a little hesitant, although we're going to get into that in the next couple of weeks, start doing our own evaluation and start to offer up opinions. But we can do an initial take on things. And Kurt has done that, I think, in a very strong way in his 9 things column today. The first thing he brought up was the Sam Gagner. One of the things he brought up was Sam Gagner not being on the team and the Oilers missing that raw guy. And we heard this from the announcers in the playoffs, that the Chicago bench was much more vocal than the Oilers bench during the playoffs. I heard that from someone, I can't remember who but someone who was in the building. I heard that comment. And Kurt's idea was that Gagner was kind of the raw, heart and soul Matt Hendricks guy in this team, and that they really missed him down the stretch. What's your thought on that, Bruce?
Yeah, the comparisons between Sam Gagner and Matt Hendricks are few. But the raw aspect, maybe. I mean, Sam was a team-centered player. I like the mature Gagner that we had early this season. I thought he was decent in his role as a fill-in, bottom sixer with some offense. He scored 12 points in 36 games for the Oilers this year. And he was the trading chip used and the salary divested in the Andreas Athanasiou trade, where the Oilers traded Gagner and 2 second-round picks to get Athanasiou and, of course, the prospect Ryan Kuffner. But basically, from a team perspective, it was Gagner out, Athanasiou in. And Athanasiou scored a goal and assist in his first game, and then he played 12 games without a single point. And Gagner, his longest scoring drought all year was 7 games, and typically every second or third or so game he would chip in somehow. So that wasn't the upgrade that it was assumed to be in the short term. Now, obviously, the jury's out on Athanasiou in the long term, but he produced nothing as an Oiler. Had some pretty bad luck, I think, in the final game of the series, but he was a pretty spotty contributor, and I didn't get the sense that he was a raw guy at all. So if that's the aspect that was missing, in that sense, the Oilers may have lost, that part of the trade. But obviously, I mean, the bet was made that Athanasiou would help the team in the short term and the long term, and now the fallback is, well, hopefully he'll help in the long term.
Yeah, the Oilers, they moved out Gagner to make the money work. Well, you brought in Tyler Ennis and Mike Green as well, right? And if they hadn't brought in those guys, they could probably have held on to Gagner. And Ennis, I thought, was a better player than Gagner. I think that was a really good move. Now he has a history of injury problems, right? And that's what floored him in the end again. And that's the risk you're taking with Ennis. But I really liked Tyler Ennis's game. I thought he was a very solid addition. Green, I never understood why they traded anything for Mike Green. The argument was in a long playoff run, you're going to need veteran defensemen. And we could see that with Larsson going out. Yeah, but I think they just needed to trust Caleb Jones and Lagesson. And I don't think Green would have offered more than Caleb Jones as your first pick. I'm not sure he would have offered. I don't think he would have offered more than Evan Bouchard. I think Evan Bouchard is a better player right now than Mike Green. So I wish they hadn't have done that deal, and maybe they could have kept Gagner. I don't know, when Ennis got hurt, who went in? Haas.
Oh, yeah, Haas went in for game 4.
Haas was fine.
And they moved Kara to the wing.
So I don't know, would Gagner, if they hadn't made the Athanasiou trade, would Gagner have offered more than Athanasiou in the playoffs? Probably he would have, because Athanasiou didn't, in the end, do much. He was a bit snake-bitten, but he also kind of fanned on shots and missed the net. And, he was fine. Athanasiou, though, was fine, I think. I didn't mind his game when he was on the third line.
He had flashes.
I just didn't like him at all. They're just zero chemistry with Draisaitl and Yamamoto, honestly. So that was part of the issue. He just constantly deferred to Draisaitl, and with that never works. Where a player is deferring, not bringing his top game. So
I thought he looked lost at sea in game 3 when he came up to replace Ennis, and I was frankly shocked in game 4 to see that line still together.
I was baffled.
Yeah, and I remain kind of shocked that for as well as they played, like the depth guys who played well in the playoffs were the 2 veteran wingers, James Neal and Alex Chason, and neither of them got a sniff in the top 6 role, and I frankly just don't quite get it.
Why they weren't moved up to play with McDavid, or one of them wasn't moved up to play with McDavid and Nuge, reunited.
Neal, the obvious choice would have been Neal.
Why Neal wasn't?
Yeah,
put Neal and Cassian with McDavid in that last game and reunite the dynamite line. Why that didn't happen? That's just mad. That's a major coaching error. And, coaches, I think, have 9 lives, Bruce. And Tippett in that series probably used about 3 of his. He hadn't used up any of his 9 lives before then, but he's used up 3 at this point. That's my take on that. So Kurt's also.
I think coaches now they have more. They don't have 9 lives. They have 3 lives. Let's face it. None of them last long. I always remember the great joke that Harry Neal told, and I don't know if it was his originally, about the 3 envelopes. Do you ever hear that line where the new coach comes in and takes over from the old coach, and the old coach says, "There's 3 envelopes in my office drawer. When you really get into trouble, pull out one of them and use it." So, of course, eventually the team gets into trouble, and he pulls out the first envelope, and he opens it, and all it says is blame the media. And then a little later, he gets into the second one, and he opens the second envelope, and it says, blame me, meaning the old coach, who lays some of the crap on him. And then the third time they get into trouble, he opens the third envelope, and all it says is, prepare 3 envelopes. But Harry Neal told it with much more. God. Harry Neal's legendary sense of humor. I just remember roaring when I heard that. He was talking about some coach who was in trouble.
Harry Neal was the Will Ferrell of NHL coaches. He's totally deadpan, comic. That's a good one. Tippett had a very strong season. There was so much that went well. He really opened up this team in terms of attacking up the middle of the ice. And
did we see that in the playoff series?
No, because they couldn't get it
any
together,
of those
Bruce.
Central release passes? They were common all season long. I honestly didn't notice it once in the 4 games. It was sort of obvious. Oh wow, they passed it where they don't usually pass it.
Well, they gave it away. Klefbom gave it away, right up the middle of the slot once, trying that pass, or a couple times, honestly. So they made the attempt, but I just think this team was out of sync more than the other team due to the layoff, and I had expected the other thing, but I had feared that it wouldn't be the case. But you're right, that great thing, and it's I think when you have, this is the difference between having Caleb Jones in the lineup or not, is he will look for that pass and he'll make that pass, but Chris Russell on his off wing can't make that pass on his backhand, and he won't. And I love Chris Russell as a hockey player in so many ways, but having him on his offside in the top four was another really brutal killer factor in this series. He can't make the easily breakout pass. He just can't because he's on the wrong side. And Tippett knew that all year long, but he wasn't going to go with Bouchard, right? He wasn't going to promote Benning and put in Bouchard into the lineup because he wasn't ready to do that. Maybe he should have. I don't know. I didn't say so at the time, so I'm not going to say so now. But I can say, I was hoping when Larsson went out that I thought the right move, and I did think I did say this at the time, was moving up Benning to play with Klefbom and putting Jones and Russell together with Jones on his offside. Because Caleb Jones on the right playing his off wing can make that dynamic pass out of his own zone. So anyway, the next thing on our list is the goalie situation that Kurt refers to. And he says, Kurt writes, quote, "I have a lot of time for Smith, but at age 38, one wonders if he isn't done. And Mikko Koskinen was never better than just okay after that. It made the terrible blunder on too many men calling the decisive game 4. Plus he let in that game, the game-winning goal, which is a bit of a stinker. That's my own interjection." Kurt goes on to say, "Can you really send Dave Tippett into a new season with the same pair of goalies? What is the definition of insanity again?" Unquote. Go ahead, Bruce. What do you think?
Well, the goaltending was adequate through the season, but not in the playoffs. I think their goaltending let them down in the series. I mean, holy crap, they let in 16 goals, Dave, in 4 games. And it wasn't like they were getting pounded with shots, because other than game 1, they really weren't. And they're, they have easy ability to move on the second goalie because Mike Smith's contract is expired. In Koskinen's case, he's got 2 years to run. So the default position is Koskinen is in, and Smith is out unless they bring him back. So unless they find a way to trade Koskinen, which probably,
no, they're not.
There would be salary cap issues, and I don't know how much market there would be for the guy, frankly. So I just think that they're likely going to be looking at going in a different direction for number 2. And all right up to the end of the season, I thought they're going to bring Smith back, and maybe they still will, but I would say the odds of that just shifted dramatically against the likelihood of that happening.
Well, and this depends on the market, right? Can they get someone better? Here's what I think that the Tippett, I thought, was going to go back to Smith in game 4, just because he had gone that was his first choice. So in the game where he had to win, I thought he would do that. I think actually he made the right choice in going with Koskinen. I think Koskinen is the better of the 2 goalies. And, the job of the goalie in the playoffs is, first of all, like you want your goalie to steal a game. That's great. But if that doesn't happen, you can't have your goalie lose a game. And I would say that Koskinen lost them game 4 as much as anyone. You just can't have that goal go in the third period, that weak goal, mediocre goal in the third period go right through you. You cannot have that. And the other third period goals were just totally freaking weird goals that got by him in game 3. So I don't hold those. And there was lots of those.
Those weren't really on the goalie. They were both midair deflections right in front of him.
Yeah, it's hard. That's hard for a goalie to stop. So I don't know. I do think the Oilers need to shake up their goalie position at this point. And I was thinking they'd probably bring back Smith too, but I always held out. Well, let's see how they do in the playoffs because that really defines. So it's hard to define Mike Smith's season on what was that, 2 periods? How many?
Yeah, a period and a half. Yeah. Well, you talk about rah guys. He was one of them.
Yeah.
But where he was put in to start the series, I think, for the veteran presence and leadership and all this kind of stuff, what you don't expect is for him to be gifting goals to the other team and being as shaky as he was. So that really sort of put paid to that. And I think that will put a different lens on how the organization thinks about bringing him back.
See, that was one of Tippett's 9 lives, I think, that decision. and then the dynamite night line being another, and then just the overall performance of the team in the playoffs being the third. And I do think they have, like, I'm sticking to my 9 lives theory for an NHL coach. You can make 9 big mistakes, and it's on the ninth one that you usually get canned. That's the way it was with McClellan, is what I'll argue. Um, so Tippett still has a long ways to go as the Oilers coach. He's got lots of goodwill from me and from other fans as well. Like I think he'll I'm hopeful, and I expect that he'll get it right. I was a little bit, his post game commentary left me a little bit cold too, Bruce, because there was criticism of the team and the team's performance, but I never saw him take anything on himself. Maybe that would be inappropriate for a leader to do that. I don't know.
Not
But
necessarily. Own some of it.
Yeah, I think he could have owned a little bit of it. And I don't know if he did in the end. I haven't watched the post game interviews because
I didn't have the heart to even watch him. I mean, we were doing a podcast at the time that it was happening, and usually after the podcast, I go back and hear especially what the coach had to say. I understand he unloaded on Koskinen a little bit, which is not necessarily the best thing either. Partly the coach's job is to have his players' backs to some degree. But I mean, I understand him being like, you could see on the bench how enraged he was by that too many men penalty. He was barely keeping it together.
Oh, he unloaded on him for that.
Yeah, apparently so. Yeah.
Oh, fair enough. Hey, fair. If it's a mental mistake on Koskinen, I say fair enough. I haven't seen that. If it was for the goal, it's one thing for us as the fans to express a disappointment that a goalie missed a shot that he probably should have saved. But for the coach, I mean, that's a little. But if it's for the too many men, I don't blame the coach. I would be totally.
He was livid at the time. You could just see it. I mean, I've never seen him look like he was ready to have his own head explode as he did in that sequence while they were figuring out what had gone wrong and how they were going to be shorthanded for the rest of the season.
It comes to every coach, every Oilers coach sooner or later, unless your name is Glenn Sather, who I never saw. He always wanted to make other people suffer, not him. So, and he did a good job of it, I have to say. Let's go to Kurt's third thing, Bruce, and he's talking about three-line center. And there was a time when it looked like the Oilers would re-sign Riley Sheahan during the regular season, just like they did with Zach Kassian. I think something that Ken Holland probably wishes he had just waited till the end of the year at this point, but let's not get into that right now.
Multiple reasons.
Yeah, but Sheahan is a decision that has to be made. Kassian's done. So we will talk about that in the future. But Sheahan, he was part of a fairly strong penalty kill after game one, and but he made a gaffe, as Kurt points out, on a big goal in game three, and really was. I know the puck was hard coming around, but you got to make that play. This is the NHL. You got to make that play. You can't cough up the puck. That's him and Kassian on that goal against. Like, there's some moments that years later go through your mind about a playoff series. I forget most of it. Unlike you, I forget most of it. But some things stick out in my head, and that is one. It's going to be that. Russell
skittering off his skate right into the middle of the ice.
Yeah, Russell tipping in the puck on the first goal against in game 4. There'll be Bear, and it was either Nurse or Draisaitl who should have helped Bear out in front of the net on that Taves goal at the end of the game. But one of them screwed up. I don't know who it was. There's Draisaitl screwing up on the last goal too with Koskinen. Like he had a chance to stop that pass out. Either take the man or stop the pass. He did neither. Anyway, there's Riley Sheahan's mistake. To get back to this, what do you think? Do you think he'll be back, Bruce?
I think it's probably 40-60. I think Kurt makes a good point that they have other options, and I mean what we saw from Gaten Haas in game 4. That's a player I want to see more of. I thought he was actually skating like with the puck in the other team's end of the ice and stuff, right?
Yes.
Sheahan, we didn't see a whole lot of that. Like, I'm pretty sure he got 0 points for the series. And Haas, in his limited bit of ice time in game 4, where are we now? Gaetan, 9 minutes and 30 seconds, during which time Edmonton outshot Chicago 8-0.
And he was in on a great scoring chance.
They were carrying the play. You don't necessarily expect them to score, but if over time, you're going to get your points. And Sheahan got a few points, and he was good on the penalty kill. So that's the other question is how do you replace that? He was good on the face-off. How do you replace that? So I don't think they have internal solutions at the minor league level necessarily. So they either have to go out and sign someone else, or they commit to Haas and Kara as 3 and 4, or but there is going to be players on the market, and maybe there's a better fit than Riley Sheahan next year. If they do sign him, it'll be a 1 year deal, and it won't be at Sheahan's asking price, I don't think. So they may well part company.
I think they could bring him back on the same contract.
Mhm.
Might be a possibility. I really like I really like Gaetan Haas's performance in that game 4.
Yeah.
He's one of the players that was getting stuff done.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's a really smart defensive player, Bruce. I noticed that all year long.
Yes.
He's on the right side of the guy in his defensive zone.
He's always on the right side of the puck. Always.
Yeah.
They're really good at that.
Unlike every other Oilers center, especially the top 2 centers who had defensive breakdowns all series long, McDavid and Draisaitl. I mean, Sheahan doesn't tend to have defensive breakdowns. Kara does have them now and then. But Haas, I like his defensive play a lot. And I could see him as it's going to depend what Tippett thinks of him and what Holland's made the assessment. I think Sheahan, if there was a contract offer in February, should have taken it. Probably, because he's not going to get a raise, and they might just make the decision actually to move on from him. But they also might decide they want, if he'll sign for the same amount on a 1-year deal, they'll give him another year, because he did have a good regular season. And this is one of those decisions where recency bias comes into play. Here I am so focused on one little play, a tough play along the board. And this is one of those where you need to okay, calm the heck down and think, okay, what are the options? Is his contract not up? Jujar's.
Oh, he signed a 2-year deal with Holland last summer on July 1st.
Okay, so he's back. You have someone who can be a 4th-line center. I have never liked the line with Kara and Sheahan on the same line. It's just slow as heck. And again, when I saw that line going into Game 4, that same line that had never worked all year long, Kara and Sheahan together, frack. Okay. Those lines, Bruce, were terrible. And I resisted making a tweet before the game, thinking, well, maybe I'll be wrong, first of all. But I just thought, I'm just not going to put out that negative energy at that moment. Maybe I'll be proven wrong, and I can just shut up about it for the rest of my life. But
full disclosure, during the games, when David's tracking the scoring chances, we have a doc, and I'm editing them and reviewing them. We have a document on the go with sort of real-time chit-chat in it. And one of the very early entries in the first period was David saying, "I hate Tip's line."
Yeah, so I didn't want to put out that negativity.
I was feeling your pain, I can tell you that.
So easy to be negative, and then also so easy to be wrong, and maybe
have to eat your words. That's always fun.
But I had been complaining about the lines all along up until then, so I thought, why be again? Maybe I'm wrong. Anyway. Mm-hmm. So Sheahan, yeah. All right.
Well, the bottom 6. I mean, there are people saying the bottom 6 is not adequate. Well, of the guys that Holland brought in, I mean, first of all, he re-signed Chase Son and Kara to 2 years, so they're under contract. Of the guys that he brought in, he re-signed Haas to a 1-year extension. He re-signed Nygaard to a 1-year extension. So even though they didn't play much in the series, not at all, in Nygaard's case, they're both on the roster for next year. He did sign Josh Archibald to a 2-year extension. And who was the 4th guy? Anyway, he's locked up a few guys. So if you're looking at making changes, well, one way to make changes is not to sign the guys who are still outstanding, like Riley Sheahan and Mike Smith, and find different players and change the mix by doing it that way. And so I suspect that the guys who haven't signed already, because of the result of the playoffs, are just less likely to be coming back than I had previously surmised.
Yeah. What does Scotty Bowman say? A team has got to change, and this team has got to change. They've got to make. Listen, of their top 4 defensemen, well, let's say the top 5, including Chris Russell. I think they need to move out 2 of those guys. Probably, but this is anyway. I shouldn't get into this because I'm overreacting.
I got all summer and fall to talk about this, David.
We do, Bruce. We do. So I'm not going to. Just as a general thing, listen. Just because they need to make room for Caleb Jones, and they need to make room for Evan Bouchard. So if Caleb Jones wasn't in your top 6 to start the playoffs, and neither was Evan Bouchard, both those players need to play next year. So they got. I think. I would say this before the playoffs started, and it's definitely been cemented by these playoffs. They need to move out 2 of the 6 players who were on their playoff roster to start. And I'm not going to say who they are because that takes more thinking. But
Matt Benning is the other guy that started the
right.
series in the top 6, and his contract has expired.
Yeah.
Well, that said, I thought Matt Benning was fine in this series.
He was really good. I don't have a whole lot of complaints about Matt Benning's play, including in Game 4. I thought he was strong. So he gets the puck on net too. That's what I'm looking for, because this decor was a bit better until they moved Russell to the off wing. This group of players was a bit better moving the puck than in previous years because of the change in strategy too of using the middle of the ice. That really helped. But they were, as a group, pretty abysmal at getting pucks on net, and that's got to change. So that's one of the things you're going to be looking at in terms of who should move out and who should stay. Bruce, Kurt's position is that Larsson should be the guy to go. I'll just find out what Kurt says here. Let me just look for it. Which point is it on his list? Okay, maybe it's the last point, which is why I can't find it. I'm still scrolling down. Yeah, it's the last. His big point is Adam Larsson, and what he writes is, quote, "I would personally move on from Adam Larsson. I admire Larsson, and I know his teammates do too. But I hope that Ken Holland reminds himself that it wasn't him that made the Taylor Hall deal. The cold, hard fact is that Larsson is a traditional shutdown D-man in a puck-moving era. He also has a bad back. It seems to flare up at the absolute worst times. And while it pains me to say this on a couple of levels, Larsson has not been close to the same player since 2016-17. And at 27, he's probably not going to get a lot better." Unquote. Bruce, I would disagree with only one part of that. Larsson did play really well by a broad consensus of fans. And I had been saying you got to trade Larsson earlier this year. I had been making that argument. So I completely get all of that thinking. But he surprised me with how well he played in the final 2 months of the season. By the end of the year, by the end of the regular season, he was playing as well as any Oilers defenseman. And if it was his back that was holding him back, that's one of those recency bias things that I think that we all have to take a step back for a second at least and think, is he going to be one of the 2 who get moved out of that group of players? And I would say anyone but Ethan Bear is on my list of players in that group who could be moved out in the right deal. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
I'm just not sure who it should be, because Caleb Jones plays the left side, Larsson's on the right side, and they still have a hole on the right side. So to me, maybe Nurse or Clefbaum are more likely. What are you thinking?
Well, they're also looking for a spot to put Evan Bouchard. Now, that isn't necessarily in the top 4. But, I mean, Jones does have the capacity to flip back and forth. I mean, Larsson, do we know for sure that it was his wonky back that put him out for the playoffs? Like, I never heard any official injury thing, but maybe they I was so put off hockey yesterday, I didn't follow through on the kind of stuff. The season's over right now.
Yeah.
But there's information out there that will get caught up on as to, or maybe there's no information because he was unfit to play is all we know. But his back has been problematic in the past with the style he plays and with the speed he goes, even when he's at full speed, to lose a half a step for that guy can be fatal. So I certainly don't think he is invulnerable from being moved at this point. He's got 1 year to go, and then they, as I say, if they're going to change up the defense, you got to find somebody to move out, find a way to move him out. I do think there'd be a market for Adam Larsson. I don't think they'd get Taylor Hall for him. but I think they got an NHL player.
They can get Taylor Hall as a UFA if they can afford him, Bruce. Um, which is a possibility, right? There's a possibility if you move out enough money, if you
I'll say
bet
non-zero.
non-zero chance. Yeah, if you know, I don't think it's like I think it's the likelihood is very small, but there's a now Arizona's winning in the playoffs, right? So
Yep.
last time I checked, so who knows?
Yep.
Maybe he'll
They
stay
won their
there.
series, and they're not going to get the first overall pick. So the Taylor Hall curse or blessing or whatever it is not going to extend into the 2020s.
Bruce, there's one thing I want to just finish up on, and this is the
Okay.
NHL's media policy of not allowing uh, beat reporters like Ryan Ershog, Mark Spector, Jim Matheson into the bubble, even to cover practices, like from a distance. Like, and Bruce, man, did we ever miss that? Did I ever miss that personally during this first round of the playoffs? We got zero information from the team itself. I was thinking the team and
Right.
people allowed in might step up and then provide us with lines, but we didn't hear their lines. We didn't Tippett wouldn't tell us their lines. I don't know what, like, were the Blackhawks banned from his practice? Wouldn't the Blackhawks be able to go and watch the practice? And maybe they wouldn't. I don't know. But I just found that to be, like, from a fan perspective, part of the fun of being a fan is talking about the lines before the game, not
Uh,
a minute before the game,
yeah.
but debating it all day, knowing what they're going to be. And that totally sucked, not having that information, that bit of information, which the regular reporters provide. So the NHL's bubble in that way has been just a stinker. That's a stinker media policy, and I hated it. Uh, Hated it more as the series went along, and they should change that as these playoffs go along. They should allow fans in other cities. They can maybe they're still working out the wrinkles, and they don't. I understand they don't want COVID to spread, but you can't. I can't see a way that you can't have three or four reporters ushered into the arena by somebody into that zone and isolated because they're going to the games, are they not? Like, they're up in the press box for the games, are they not?
Yeah, and they were there throughout phase three. So I don't understand it. And I share your antipathy towards the utter lack of information. I mean, I wrote two game day posts in the series, and both times I was writing with zero idea of what the actual lineup was going to be. And both times I guessed wrong because you just didn't have any information. Like they didn't say who was in the frickin' starters net before the game, let alone you know that Adam Larsson might have an issue you know or what have you that they don't have all the players available. So it was pretty difficult to do what's normally pretty routine stuff, right? You get the game day skate, you find out who's rushing with who, and so on. A little bit of scuttlebutt about who might be the extra guy in practice, or took the morning off or what have you. There was none of it, and it was frustrating.
Maybe, well, people could say, well, you're just like the mainstream reporters complaining that you just, you want to write your posts off this information, but we're fans. Like, we're also fans here. I
Oh
think a
yeah, of
lot of
course.
fans were missing that
I
information. I
don't
think we're
know this
speaking,
stuff. That's why we write is for the other fans like us who want to know this
yeah.
stuff.
So I think that I think that most fans are going to be on board here. Whereas they at first there wasn't much of a fan reaction to this. I bet you now that there's going to be lots of pissed off fans about this particular issue that came up. And as the playoffs go on, if they keep it up, there's going to be even more because it's kind of ridiculous, honestly. And I thought, well, the team is going to step up and provide us with this information. They'll just give, but they didn't. There's a total,
Hmm.
well, I'm not going to say it's a failure of team media, like of the Oilers media network, because they're corporate media. They are the team. This is what is expected from organizations. If they can hide information or not report information or do it incompetently because they're a big bureaucracy and they're not, their primary interest isn't the fans, they're going to have all kinds of reasons for not getting it right. It's only with competition and opening things up and transparency that a system works. And this system failed the fans, and is going to continue to fail the fans until they change that policy. So
Yeah, well, goodness knows we're far enough removed as fans. I mean, when you also remove the independent media, where it's just that extra layer between the the fans in the game. Like, we're in some ways presenting these games in an antiseptic environment. Well, there's a certain amount of immediacy that's missing altogether.
Yeah.
In other ways, there's new ways of immediacy that we don't normally have because we can hear things that you don't normally hear during games because of crowd noise and so on. But
A little bit.
there was a lot of things that just seem removed. Um,
You couldn't hear the player. Like for all the talk of worry about a player swearing
well,
or saying something, like you couldn't really. It was a big
they
blur.
edited out some stuff, no doubt, because they had the
Yeah.
5 second delay. But
Maybe that's it. Maybe they cut out all this stuff. But I couldn't hear a whole lot of like, during regular broadcasts you can hear them yell wheel, 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 or stuff like that. And I didn't hear any more of that. I think I heard less of it. Like it seemed to me more of like a blur, the whole mix of the sound and the game. So in some ways there was less than you get with a live crowd. Maybe because it was on the 5 second delay, it was sanitized. I don't know. But even just regular normal things that the players shout at each other, like time, 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 or wheel, wheel. Like again, didn't hear it very much. So should we leave it
I
there?
heard the bench's reaction was a little more obvious to things like hits and block
Yes,
shots. The whole
that was
bench
good.
erupts at once, and of course, in a crowd situation, it's hard to filter that out above the crowd noise. And in this, it was pretty obvious which bench was probably doing the yelling. But it was the whole thing is just kind of surreal, isn't it?
Yeah.
The only
All
thing
right.
that's normal is here we are out of the playoffs again for the 13th time in 14 years.
Does this officially count that they made the playoffs, Bruce, or not? Like,
Well,
how does
what they're saying is, now the playoffs are starting with 16 teams, so it's kind of
the stats count as
uh,
playoff stats, don't they?
yeah, yeah, they do, and so it's
It's
kind of,
playoff wins and losses on the coach's
yeah,
record, correct?
yeah, I believe so. So it's kind of the second season, but it's kind of this extra layer that's normally not there, and we're still not quite sure how they're. I
I'm
mean, we're in the draft lottery. We must have missed the playoffs, right?
I'm going to go with the Oilers made the playoffs just because
And got in the draft
and
lottery.
got in the draft lottery. I'm going to go with the win-win, Bruce. I'm going to go with the win-win on this because
Well,
I feel they made the
hopefully,
playoffs off the
hopefully it's a
regular.
win, and they win the draft.
Yeah, now you're talking. Now you're talking like an Oilers fan. Put
Yeah.
on our rally caps. All right, thanks, Bruce. Thanks for
All
talking.
right. Yeah. Thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.